Welcome back to 5-Minute Bible Study. I'm going to do my best here. It's a lot of verses, and this really hit me, so I don't want to rush it, so I might have to break it up into two. And just a little side note, to be honest, this story was talked about in the 3rd season of The Chosen, and I have to say that it was probably the most moving episode for me. It requires a build-up because you can see Peter's struggles in the previous episodes, but just a little plug for The Chosen. Chosen doesn't even know I exist, so it does me no good to plug them, but I'm plugging them. Matthew 14:22-36. I'll read the whole verse, the whole section, and then we'll just get through what we can get through. 5 minutes is not a lot of time. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and, beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." I'm actually going to stop it there. Verse 33. So this will sound like nothing major, but at first he uses the word immediately. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get in a boat and go on ahead while he stayed back. And I just noticed at that time, okay, it's a strong word. Why? Why did he make them immediately go? But don't worry about it. It'll come up later. But so the disciples go, he stayed back. He wasn't concerned about immediately going with them ASAP. He stayed behind. He needed to be alone with God, talking to him after spending so much time with other people and helping them. Now he needed some time with God. After a while, the crowds are gone. The disciples are on their way. He was the only one left. And so he decides to go to them, and his mode of transportation is to walk to them on water. And I made a note here that he made this choice. It was a deliberate choice. He could have walked, he could have swam, he could have hitched a ride on another boat, but he chose to do this freaky thing, to walk on water and to let them see it. He chose to expose himself like this. And if I was the disciples, I would be scared too. They were vulnerable, they were in waves on a boat, it was windy out, and so their automatic assumption is it was a ghost. And I just wondered, okay, back then, were ghosts believed in? But anyways, thinking it was a ghost, they cry out in fear. The next thing was, Jesus immediately said to them. So here's that word again, immediately. It's a strong word. He can move, I wrote here, Jesus can move immediately when it is right to do so. So maybe sometimes we think God doesn't know what he's doing, or God is acting too slow. But he knows when things need to be done immediately. And immediately he said, "Don't be afraid." He spoke only words. There was no change in the disciples' situation except for receiving some words of reassurance. And I wrote here, will we let Jesus' words calm us, even if that's all we have? Even if circumstances don't change, that there's nothing different except that we picked up our Bible or we heard a sermon or we listened to a song, and Jesus spoke to us through that. And all we have are his words of reassurance. Will we let those words calm us when that's all we have? And I wrote here that it's like he said to them, "Don't be afraid. It is me. You know me. You know who I am. You know what I can do. You've seen other amazing things that I've done. It's just me, the miracle worker. You can trust me. Don't be afraid." Because by this point, they did know him. They had seen amazing things. Are they going to trust what they've seen in the past right now? And then I like when Peter says, if it's you. And I wrote down here that he's doubting. He still wants more assurance. Prove it. Tell me to join you in this unbelievable moment. I want to feel it. I want to experience it. And Jesus didn't mind the if. He didn't mind that question and the challenge. And he did what Peter asked. He asked him to join him on the water. And I noted here that he did what Peter asked. Here, he was okay with that request. And I wondered if it was because Peter wasn't demanding proof like the Pharisees did, where they said, do a miracle, da-da-da. He wasn't demanding proof from a heart of callous disbelief, like the Pharisees. He was asking from a heart of really wanting to know him. If it's really you, tell me to come. And he did. And Peter answered the call. He didn't abort. And I thought, imagine the fear and the faith to put your foot on the water or in the water, who knows how it felt, and to trust that that water would hold you, that you wouldn't sink. That's courageous. That's brave. He headed in Jesus' direction while taking steps in fear and faith, and that's okay. He took steps in Jesus' direction in fear and faith, but he was still going in Jesus' direction. And at first, he must not have seen the wind, because it doesn't say that the wind blew up after he was on the water. The wind was already blowing when he took his first steps on the water. But he so wanted to be with Jesus that he didn't see it at first, because he was so focused on Jesus, which was awesome and made him take that first step. He was so focused on Jesus, that was clearer to him than the wind whirling around. But then once he started walking on water, once we start walking on water in life and following Jesus and experiencing amazingness, it's easy to get caught up and to forget what got us there in the first place, which was taking a step out in fear and faith. Maybe at first he was in awe to be walking on water in such amazing conditions, such terrible conditions. But then he started to notice the seriousness of the wind. And that seemed bigger and more important than Jesus. But I like that in his fear and doubt, there was still faith, because look who he called out to save him. He called out for Jesus. Help me, save me. We can be a terrified person. We can be afraid and have faith and still call out for Jesus to save him. Doesn't mean he was faithless. He was scared, and he still called to Jesus. In our fear and doubt, help us to still have faith in who Jesus is, to still call on him to save us. And immediately, there's that word again 3 times, immediately he touched him. He reached out his hand. He saved him. With the closest of contacts, grabbing his hand, he caught him. He was going down, but Jesus used his own hands. He got them dirty to hold up Peter. And I always call Summer Boo, and so I feel like he may have said, hey, Boo, why did you go back to the way you were? Why did you forget and question who I was or what I could do for you? What made you blink there? What made you doubt? Hold on. Hey, look back here. Don't forget me. Don't go there. And then they came out together, the Savior and the saved, walked out of the storm into the safety of the boat together, the Savior and the saved. I don't know any other God who does that. I don't know any other God who walks with us in the wind and the waves, who holds us up when we start to fall, and walks us to safety together, Savior and the saved. That's what makes God and Jesus amazing. And when they got through it, the storm calmed down. And I know that this is going long, but this is the last point. Everyone saw in the boat the whole thing. They saw the faith, they saw the doubt, they saw the rescue. And this made them worship. So remember this one sentence. Shaky testimonies that end in God's hands causes people to worship God. Shaky testimonies